different about planning centrally the money supply as compared to planning farming. Farming only feeds us, but the money sustains every single transaction. It is a participant in everything that we do. It is the unit of account that we have to measure every transaction. All our services and all our goods are measures in terms of the unit of account. And if we believe that we can plan centrally and determine that unit of account without the market participating, I think we get what we have now, very chaotic conditions, which are bound to get more chaotic after a period of time. So I don't believe that central planning in money can be successful. I happen to believe and accept the ideas of the Austrian School of Economics, as Mises in particular explained, that the business cycle is precisely caused by central planning of money, and that the booms and busts are inevitable. That as we drive the economy this year and for next year's election, you will see conditions improve, but sure enough, you will see the consequence of the inflation that we have today. In a couple years, you will see the recession, if not the depression of '86 or '87. So it is for this reason, out of a humanitarian concern for our people, that we must reject the notion of central planning in money, just as we reject the central ideas of central planning in agriculture or steel manufacturing. So central planning of money, I reject outright. The second major reason why I reject the notion of paper money is the issue of power. I believe we must address this because even though those who wield the power and the control of the money, I sincerely believe they're well motivated to do what is good and right for the people. Just as the liberal interventionist is assuming he's doing good by building houses for the poor people. But they never take into account that they tear down more houses than they build up, and that so much of the HUD money goes to building country club communities. So I would say the same thing happens because the power is abused and misdirected. But it's an ominous power. There is no other power greater than the power over money, the power to create and contract the money supply, the power to control the purchasing power of your money. Throughout history, this has proven to be the most sought-after monopolistic power of man. And it has become more sophisticated over the decades and over the centuries, more sophisticated now and more international in scope than ever before. So I see the issue of power and the control over money as being something that we cannot ignore, we must address. I believe closely associated with this is the issue of morality as well. By what moral right do we have to create purchasing power out of thin air? Whether it's done by the creation of credit or Federal Reserve notes, or whether it's the creation of SDRs in an international scope, by what right do they do this? Is it any more moral to dilute the value of your purchasing power of the money you hold in your wallet than it is for the farmer to dilute the milk supply with water? I would say there's an issue of morality here just as strong as the issue of power. I also happen to believe also, because it's a moral issue more than an economic issue, it is for this reason that the people have lost trust in their government, trust in the banks, trust in business, trust in themselves, and that we are a nation of distrust. And it's for this reason I believe that until we restore trust in government, trust in the system, and trust in the money, there will be no resolution of this problem. It is the issue of trust in people and trust in money that must come before you can start talking about nickeling and diming it, trying to get back to a balanced budget, because that certainly hasn't worked. So I think it's important to address the issue of central planning, the issue of power, and third, I think that we must address in general terms the issue of the origin of money. I know that's been talked about, and we recognize, those of us who believe in commodity money, clearly understand that money, paper money and credit creation didn't come out of the marketplace. That came out of the heads and the fantasies of the intellectuals and the government officials of those who want paper to be money, but never out of the marketplace. So I would say the paper standard is bucking history, and it's bucking economic law and economic truth, and they only can do it with force and more power to make people accept it, because economically and historically, paper is not money. It can't be money. It's only money because we're forced to use it and because there's a residual trust in the pieces of paper that we carried around because at one time it did have real value. Just think for a moment. If all of us were stranded on a small island and we had absolutely nothing else, no trade, but we were all put on the island and we were expected to survive, we would have to do what to create capital to survive? We would have to get our food and build our houses and make our tools. And everything that we had in excess of what we consume could be our capital and we could trade it. But how many of you would accept the idea that if we were all working busily and making trades and somebody gives a bushel of wheat for a bushel of corn, how many of you would accept the notion if we had the one individual to arrive on the beach and he said, I'll solve all your problems, I'm going to create wealth for you. I have this little thing called a printing press and I'm going to print up Federal Reserve notes and you'll all be wealthy. How many would trust the individual? He would probably be thrown off the island for coming up with a scandalous idea. It wouldn't work. You have to have something that people seek after and they hold as something important and something that they will hold as money. History shows that people have chosen gold first and probably silver second. But most people in the economy, they'd rather have cigarettes than pieces of paper. So we have three major issues: central planning, the issue of power, and the issue of the origin of money, where I do not believe on the long run, if you live in a free society, you can buck the tide, the trend, the issues of economic law, and the issue of common sense. Now, fourth, and this is a major issue with me as well, one of the fundamental reasons why I believe we must have restraint on the creation of credit. And that is, if you truly believe in freedom, if you truly believe in a free society, if you do, that means you believe that government should be limited to the protection of your liberty, not to the transfer of wealth. The paper money system is there to enhance those who believe in the transfer of wealth. You can transfer just so much wealth with taxation and the people rebel. But we're at the point now where you can't tax them anymore. We transferred over $220 billion worth of wealth last year that we couldn't even tax the people for. Can you imagine if we'd have proposed at the beginning of last year that we were going to raise taxes by $220 billion? Never. It wouldn't have been acceptable. But we did run up the deficit, so we delivered this to the Fed, and the Fed accommodates us. The Fed accommodates the politician, and the politician gets reelected. So what does he do? Not only does he destroy the economy by manipulating the whole business cycle by the creation of new money, what he does is we lose twice, because he takes the money and he spends it on programs that don't work. Instead of doing the things they were supposed to do, the programs do exactly the opposite. You don't get more houses by the government building houses, you get less. And I also have come to the conclusion that in the last few years that you don't even get more defense when you spend more money in the military budget. You get less defense for that. So I would say that so often when you can get the money so cheaply by just sending a little Federal Reserve or sending over a Treasury bill and get whatever you need, that I would say this enhances and it gives the ability of the politician and government to be all powerful. And that to me is our great threat, because the programs are a threat to our freedom. The money, as it's being destroyed and as it's being inflated and causes the crises that we see around the world. And the best example, of course, is at our border in the South. Those crises threaten the political freedoms. I believe that if we could have a free society and sound money and gave up all our material assets, I believe that if we had our freedoms, we could survive without any difficulty whatsoever. But the problem today is what we're doing is we're destroying the money and at the same time destroying our freedoms. It was not by accident that the currency had to change over a period of time. The government size grew. So from 1913 to 1971,